we want to make it as simple as possible and have tools that talk to each other and communicate to each other, right? In the modern day era, we have still all these different security layers, but they all need to be able to talk, right? Threat actors, they go all through the various pieces, right? Could be coming in through identity or email or various pieces. So if your tools aren't talking, then they're not modern, in my opinion.
I like it.
We are the Keyboard Samurai, a podcast focused on sharing insights to help those working in cybersecurity companies, be them technology or services. Each session, your host, Will Klusovsky, aka Will Clue, sits down with professionals in our industry to illuminate topics that will help your security biz, team, or self be better. Let's hack into it now.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. As always, like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Today, I am excited to bring on Ben. Ben, welcome to the show. Why don't you give us the 20, 30 seconds of who you are and why we care?
Hey, Will, thanks for having me. Ben Wilcox, I'm the CTO and CISO at ProArc. I've been here for 18 years. I've had about 12 different jobs during that time frame, but everything is always leading me towards security during that time frame. In the olden days, it was more infrastructure, and then in 2010s, there was a lot of consulting around that. And today, it's helping ensure that our customers have the right solutions, all tied back with the right strategy around security, so that they can move towards data and insights for their business.
Nice, like it. So we're going to chat about modernizing your cyber tech stack, which I like. So anything that we can talk about that helps the listeners, those of us in situations where you and I, working in the security space a lot of times, right? We've got, especially for like MSPs and MSSPs or people who are just overwhelmed with all the amount of technology that they personally have. So when we talk about that modernization, first off, let's just go ahead and define that. When you say modernizing, what do you mean by that?
Well, for me, it's thinking about it from a more holistic perspective, right? How do we reduce the risk? And, for risk for me is not a technical risk. It's an operational risk, right? We want to, that's what the board ultimately cares about at the end of the day, or, the people that are running the business, right? How do we keep running? So let's get rid of the technical side of it, but we want to make it as simple as possible and have tools that talk to each other and communicate to each other, right? In the modern day era, we have still all these different security layers, but they all need to be able to talk, right? Threat actors, they go all through the various pieces, right? Could be coming in through identity or email or various pieces. So if your tools aren't talking, then they're not modern, in my opinion.
I like it. For the last probably 3 or 4 years, I've been talking about modernizing SecOps, which is along those lines. It's less of a technical thing. And I mean, there's a technical part of it, but it's always about, the SOC shouldn't be just its own little thing. Like they should know what the GRC team is doing, and that data should be fed into there. And you should have your end user awareness fed into that as well. And you should have a modernized, complete view for the CISO and team to be able to look at, hey, this is actually the state of my organization, right?
Yep, 100% agree, right? Get those agreed upon protection level agreements that you have, your PLAs, right, across the board. How do you protect what you have, right? Whether it's from systems to identities, that visibility piece is really key, I think.
So what's the process you recommend, go about, use, see, whatnot, for an organization looking to do this modernization?
So I start, but for me, when I think about this, I go to what is your risk areas that you have not covered at this moment, right? Or maybe ones that you feel like are lagging. Oftentimes, we're still seeing a lot of gaps between. Let's say you look at what's happening with the SIM side of it, right? You don't have tools that correlate going back towards your identity or your email or your endpoint, right? SIM's kind of sitting over in its own thing, and the SOCs doing stuff over there, but then they have to go jump to another dashboard to go see something else over here. So the lack of correlation there is a big piece. So, right, you look at it from a risk perspective, right? Where are your organizational risks? What could be compromised within your environment that could impact your business operations, and start at that. So most of the time, right now, honestly, it's probably more than 50%. We're seeing identity being the biggest piece from a risk perspective. And it's also probably one of the easier ones to kind of get some visibility into once you have the right tools in place that can kind of correlate across those.
Right. Yeah. Identity is the new perimeter is the words that I'm hearing. And I've talked to some identity providers and both the specialized space and stuff. And then if you look at like XDR technology, having things in the identity area itself now too, similar to we have with the endpoint and with the cloud and all that, it is becoming a pretty big focus point. And it's a nightmare to take care of. Like it's, IGA alone is just a nightmare, which is crazy. But again, it's all process. It's a lot of it is process, and the technology I think just doesn't. Is it the technology doesn't support the process easily? Because I know I know there's companies out there who pretty much can make a living just making Microsoft / Entra do the thing it's supposed to do without using the command line.
Sure. 100%. I mean, there's a lot of businesses. So part of ProArc, we're very Microsoft centric. We're very Microsoft security oriented. We're part of MISA, the Microsoft Intelligence Security Association. I get to meet a lot of the other associates in companies at these various events, and there's always some great ones on identity. I mean, people have entire businesses of 60 to 100 people, sometimes even more, just based on identity. And in bigger environments, they have to go do those things because I'll take for example like ProArc, we're about 500 people, right? If we don't do some things around processes of onboarding, offboarding, automating identities, types of things, it becomes a problem. It's super hard to manage your business and manage your risk, and doing those things. Those things need automation and they need tools. And so like some of the stuff with like Entra and their governance pieces, right, that makes it a whole lot simpler. Now, nothing here in life, and I've determined this with security, is like you can just go turn it all on and it all works for you, right?
Yeah, sure.
They're starting to build agents that can start doing things for you and make it easier. Like you still need to figure out your process, right? What is your process and define that? But the days of going in and having to code it all, those are kind of going away, I think. Right? You put in your parameters to the agent, it's going to go build your workflow for you. And then your onboarding, offboarding is much more streamlined.
Right. And you just keep the human in the loop to make sure it does the right things.
Exactly.
Is that the kind of approach you think that people should be looking for then? Is it agentic, or is it just sort of automation? Like what exactly, like where are those processes defined and live and things like that?
Well, I don't think we're quite at the point where agents are going to be solving our problems yet. I think it's changed, right? If you go back 6 months ago, no one was really talking about agents. Today, right, all the big players are talking about agents and what they're doing. Doesn't matter if it's CrowdStrike, Microsoft, but there's still human in the loop. That's going to be in there for a long time, I think, at least a couple of years till we can start feeling like we can really trust it. And we can build the types of controls where we can feel very consistent on its output. That's the thing that they have to kind of get through on the LLM piece, and maybe it's getting more fine-tuned. I tend to follow tech in general, and there's some independent, small team of 5 people that got way better control than anything that
Sure.
Gemini was able to put out or OpenAI, and so like. There's some smart people out there that will solve some stuff and be able to get us so that we can trust the output of agents a lot more and feel like we can, they'll follow the rules. But, that's a little bit away. So for now, typically if I'm looking at tech, I'm looking for things that, have some AI built in from a roadmap perspective, not a chatbot, right? We want to be able to start doing things that can speed up the process, right? Having it answer a query doesn't really have too much value, in my opinion. Like there's productivity tools out there that can do that, right? So we're looking for things that can automate processes, do things a lot faster, enrich in different ways where it makes it easier, right, to bring it across these different dispersed data sources. So if you can get things that can start kind of going down that path, that's a big piece for me. is
Right.
making sure that it's on the roadmap. It doesn't have to be fully baked, but I mean, your vendor should be able to clearly tell you where they're going to be in 6 months from a development perspective, and where AI plays into that.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think there's a company out there or in the technology space that's not talking about where the AI fits into their offering. Some probably put it probably launch things a little too soon. But kind of let me pull on that thread a little bit, because like I remember back in the days, like early days of SIM, when before SOAR was a technology, we were just talking about automation, right? And this was where we basically just like, let's automate a blacklist. Like we see this thing, threat intelligence says this thing's coming on, cool, do this, run this little configuration and update the firewall, the SIM, whatever. And even back then, like the problem wasn't the technology. Yeah, it was harder because we had to kind of hard code it in and learn it all. But
Sure.
at the end of the day, the problem tended to lie with the client or the organization or the tech stack, and not knowing, not having enough confidence in the data coming in and the results of it to be able to automate things. And so now we have AI, which is way better at automating things and very easy, but I don't know that the processes necessarily, like, I'm curious as to how many people that you're looking at or seeing from this modernization perspective are comfortable being like, yeah, let's just automate all that because we really think that, we have our crap figured out.
Not many. Honestly, the data is still a problem. It doesn't matter if you're in security or if you're in business and you're trying to do things with AI. Data quality is poor typically. And so, one of the things I was thinking that's kind of interesting about this last year too is I've seen all these big vendors really moving towards data lakes for their security side of things, right? When it comes to SecOps, right? Being able to bring it in, Microsoft released it for Sentinel. They got the big data lake. It's now cheap, and it's going to save you money. But what they want you to get to, right, is storing all of your information in there, and then being able to leverage AI across that, right, and using more potential compute or data to surface that insight. You still need to be able to clean up things, and that piece is coming in as part of that data lake, which is good. Being able to make sure that you are filtering the right stuff, right? You're populating all the tables. You don't have mismatched data, and that's something that we start doing within business operational data. So data warehouses, we got to go through a cleaning process to be able to kind of get through the various layers. In data, typically, like if you're deploying a modern data warehouse, you have your bronze layer, which is like all of your data, right? You don't really clean it or anything else.
Just get it there.
Right. Then you have your silver layer in this medallion architecture, and that silver layer is cleaned up, right? And this is where you start being able to pull more insights from, right? This is maybe where your data engineers or other people that are actually building, some more advanced use cases are in there. And then you have your bronze layer, and that's really your presentation layer. That's where business level data is. You might do some transformations and other pieces up there, and that's ready to use for the business. And there's a quality that has to be associated with that data. So, for example, sales data, maybe you need a data quality of 90%, right? You want to make sure that 90% of that stuff's good in there, and everything else is okay from that perspective. But I think we're going to start moving towards this perspective in the security side of it, where we're going to start extracting different layers and being able to use it for different reasons. And maybe AI, because we need high quality data, is only going to be on this gold layer, right? And we're only going to be operating on that front, where all of your raw logs are going to be sitting over in this data thing, and your SecOps team, when something hits the fan, right, that's where they're going to go dig through that stuff. And the quality of the data is less important on that front. You just need the context and the logging.
Yeah, that's interesting perspective, and I've seen it too. Recently, I had an organization kind of about basically, moving from one SIM to the other, and they're like, we have to get rid of the data we have here because the new one's coming in and this one's expiring. So we don't really care. Like, we would like it to be indexable and we'd be able, and data quality, but at the end of the day, it just has to go.
Yep.
And because it's so big, it's going to take that. Like, you can only have X amount of upload speed, right? So it's only going to go as fast as you want. So it's like, well, you have to sacrifice quality to meet the deadline because the bills do, right? And then, so now, like, then organizations like that is highly going to be reliant on all right, now that it's up there, can we use AI to go find all of this stuff when we actually need to? Or, hey, just cross our fingers, there's no investigation, because we're HIPAA or PCI or whatever, that we have to like retain records for X amount of years, right?
Yeah, totally. That's we see a lot of migrations like that too, where you just kind of want to cut off what you're at, right? Maybe you don't even like your environment anymore, right?
Right.
I relate it to these old, I've been around a long time with Microsoft stuff, and I used to, before security, I used to do SharePoint, which was a terrible, terrible job. And
yeah, I've been there.
SharePoint, right, always started off with the best intentions, right? We got this nice environment. You can go store some documents and some data over here. And then, 5 years into a business, SharePoint is a disaster because there's no data governance and no control. And I feel like everyone's security operations has kind of gone like that over the last 5 years as we've matured and changed things and stuff like that. There's a lot of bad data out there. So we see a lot of people just kind of cutting off what they have and saying, you know what, we'll archive it, we'll have it, but we're not going to really do anything with it because it's not of too much value, because we want to do things in a new way, new structure.
Yeah, I don't think that's bad. I mean, again, like if you need the archive for whatever reason, like depending on, I don't know how much heuristic data or baselines are in there that you probably can pull out anyway in the configuration. Like, you're not going to start from scratch necessarily, but yeah, do you need all that data? Yeah, let's do things the new way. I mean, we look at, you talked about like Sentinel. I remember when I went to work for Microsoft company, coming from the security world of SIM tools, like they monitored compliance, like that was a thing. And then you get over to Microsoft and it was like, and they were like, hey, well, we need to do some PCI stuff. I was like, isn't there just a use case? They're like, no, it doesn't work that way, right? It's evolved because, well, Microsoft has a platform, not to get down that thing, right? But they do all their compliance outside of it. Now we have all these GRC tools, and now we have all these other things that monitor. Now we have XDR. So like the way we use SIM today isn't the same way it was originally used. And all, even starting from, basically just being log monitoring. I think Splunk wasn't even really a SIM company to begin with at the start of it, right?
They weren't. The first time I deployed Splunk, and it was a free version. I want to say it was just a logging tool, right? It was like syslog. That's all it was in the back end, and you could query it and pull it out maybe a little nicer than your Kiwi server. I think it was. It's the other popular one at that time, but we just put some firewall logs in there because we had to retain them for customers, right? And that's all it was. There was nothing fancy about it at that point.
Right. So we talk a lot, the data lakes, we talk about the identity. What are some of the other aspects here in the last few minutes we have that people should be paying attention to when they're looking at that modernization?
Well, we talked about where agents are going, right? And some of this, a little bit about that. I think, right, that's a strategy that people need to start thinking about, how you're going to treat your agentic stuff, because it will come, right? Whether you as a IT
you want it or not.
Whatever, right? Your users are going to start figuring out where this stuff is, and it's going to end up in your products, and you're not even going to realize that it's necessarily there. So how are you going to start treating that, right? And what sort of governance are you going to put around that? Because that's the next thing for this year. I think we're going to see a ton of focus on identity with agents, what they're doing, ownership of those, how to assign correct permissions. Microsoft put out some, they called it Agent 365 as part of Ignite this year. And really it's a management platform for establishing governance practice around agents. They're talking, in the keynote, they said 1.3 billion agents by 2027 will be out there. So if you think about it, right, it's 1/5 of the population. That's another, it's a lot of new identities out there and things that have to be controlled. And who owns that agent after the creator goes away or decides to leave, right? How do you reassign that? How do you know that that agent's still doing the same thing that it should be doing? So those are all really interesting things that I think we're all going to have to tackle in this next year is looking at that future state.
Yeah, the agent management. Yeah, because I remember like 3 or 4 years ago, the conversation was things need identities, right? IoT, OT now has identity. So you have like machine identities now. So we're starting to look at everything as an identity, and which just makes the IGA, the governance part of it, even more of a pain in the butt. Although I think most PSI gauges and PLCs aren't moving departments or changing permissions or things like that.
Well, you never know. I used to have a buddy that worked at a big car manufacturing. Like they would lose like huge pieces of the assembly line because the plants are so big. They're like, yeah, we can't do this production run, and we were out for a week because we couldn't find the machinery. I'm like, how do you lose something the size of like a giant room, right? Like, but,
that's great. Yeah, I just did a couple podcasts with some OT people, and it's funny. It's a hoot.
it's a whole other realm, and sometimes things do walk away and end up in different spots. Most of the time, no, but I agree.
Right. Well, Ben, this has been awesome, man. Where can everybody find you on the interwebs if they want to reach out?
Yeah, I'm most active on LinkedIn. So Ben Wilcox, Wilcox, Ben. You can also see very active on our ProArch blog and our podcast page. So that's PROARCH, ProArch with an H.com. Love to connect with you guys. Any questions, ever reach out. Always happy to talk about Microsoft.
Awesome, man. It was great chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks for enjoying Keyboard Samurai Podcasts. If you'd like to engage, find Will on LinkedIn at /WillClue or visit at willclue.me. That's WILKLU.me for more info. Disconnecting now. Synac you later.